My childhood home was a sprawling split-level ranch-style place in rural Minnesota. It was the kind of house that felt endless when you were a kid, full of weird architectural quirks, dead-end hallways, a basement that ran the entire length of the structure, and a distinct separation between the living areas and the bedrooms. I was 12 years old at the time. My sister, who was 17 and usually my babysitter, was away on a jagged rebellion phase, staying with a boyfriend my parents hated. That meant on this specific Friday night in November, I was truly alone. My parents were attending a late-night gala for my dad's company. It was a formal event 2 towns over, meaning they wouldn't be back until at least 2 a.m. I remember my mom hesitating at the door, her hand on the knob, looking back at me. "You have the emergency numbers on the fridge," she said, her voice tight. She was the overreactor of the family, always assuming the worst. "Lock the deadbolt the second we step out. Don't answer the landline unless it rings twice, stops, and rings again. That's our code." "I know, Mom. I'll be fine. I have pizza and the new PlayStation game. Just go," I told her, trying to sound braver than I felt. My dad, the calm thinker, just clapped me on the shoulder. "He's a young man now, Linda. He's got this. Buster is here. Nobody's getting past Buster." Buster was our golden retriever. He was a sweet dog, but he had a bark that sounded like a tectonic plate shifting. That was enough reassurance for them. They left. I watched their taillights fade down the long gravel driveway until the darkness swallowed them. I locked the deadbolt. I checked it twice. Then I put the chain on. For the first 2 hours, it was great. It was that specific kind of freedom you only get as a kid, eating junk food on the white carpet, playing Metal Gear Solid with the volume turned up way too high. But around 10:30 p.m., the atmosphere in the house shifted. It started with the wind. A storm front we hadn't expected rolled in, battering the siding with heavy gusts. The house began to groan. It was an old structure, so settling noises were normal, but this felt different. It felt like the house was reacting to something. I paused my game. The silence that rushed into the room was heavy, almost pressurized. It was faint, coming from the other end of the house, the bedroom wing. I sat perfectly still, holding my breath, my heart doing that painful double tap against my ribs. My logical brain tried to kick in. "It's the wind," I told myself. "It's a branch hitting the siding." I looked down at Buster. He was lying on the rug near the TV. Usually, if a squirrel so much as farted 3 blocks away, his ears would perk up, but he was fast asleep. That calmed me down. If the dog wasn't worried, I shouldn't be worried. I unpaused the game. 20 minutes later, it happened again. This wasn't a thump. This was the distinct, high-pitched whine of the floorboards in the hallway leading to my parents' bedroom. I knew that sound. I knew exactly which board it was. It was the one right outside the linen closet. I muted the TV instantly. "Buster," I whispered. The dog lifted his head. He didn't growl. He didn't bark. He just looked. He stared intently toward the darkened archway that led to the kitchen and the hallway beyond. His ears were swiveled forward. "Is someone there?" I called out. My voice cracked, sounding pathetic in the large room. Silence. I stood up, grabbing the heaviest thing I could find. A solid brass candlestick holder my mom kept on the mantel. I felt ridiculous, like a character in a bad movie, but the primal instinct to arm myself was overwhelming. I walked into the kitchen. The linoleum was cold under my socks. The layout of our house was a U shape. I was at the bottom of the U. The bedrooms were on the left tip. The kitchen connected them. I reached for the phone on the wall to check for a dial tone, just a comfort check. The dial tone was there. Okay. Good. I peered down the long, dark hallway. The only light came from the digital clock on the microwave behind me, casting a weak green glow that barely reached the first door. "Hello," I said again. Nothing. I convinced myself I was being paranoid. I turned back to the fridge to get a soda, trying to shake the feeling of being watched. That's when I saw it. We had a sliding glass door in the kitchen that looked out onto the backyard deck. It was pitch black outside, so the glass just reflected the kitchen interior. But because I had the fridge door open, the light from inside the refrigerator illuminated a patch of the deck outside. There, pressed against the glass, was a handprint. It wasn't a smudge. It was a fresh, greasy palm print, the finger splayed wide. And it was low, near the bottom of the glass. My stomach dropped so hard I felt dizzy. I knew that glass had been clean earlier. My mom had Windexed it before they left because she was obsessive about streaks. Someone had been crouching on the deck. Recently. I slammed the fridge shut and backed away, gripping the candlestick. Panic, cold and sharp, flooded my veins. I looked at the lock on the slider. It was engaged. A wooden dowel was in the track. They couldn't get in that way. I needed to call the police. I reached for the wall phone again. But before I could lift the receiver, I heard a sound that froze the blood in my veins. It came from inside the house. From the basement door, which was located in the kitchen, just a few feet away from where I was standing. The distinct metallic click of the doorknob turning. The door was locked. I knew it was locked. My dad always locked the basement, but as I watched, the brass knob slowly rotated to the left, hit the internal stop, and then rotated slowly back to the right. Someone wasn't trying to get in from the outside. Someone was already down there, and they were trying to come up. My eyes were glued to the brass knob of the basement door. It had stopped moving. For a second, the silence of the house returned, but it was a deceptive, heavy silence. The kind that screams. My brain was trying to process the impossible geometry of the situation. The handprint was on the outside deck. The movement was inside the basement. Logic, or panic disguised as logic, told me I had to move. I couldn't stay in the kitchen, the kill box, as my dad jokingly called it during Nerf wars, because it had 3 entry points. I needed a stronghold. I grabbed the cordless phone from the wall mount, my hands shaking so violently I almost dropped it. I whistled for Buster. He was already up the hair on his back, standing in a rigid mohawk, a low vibrating growl emitting from his chest that I could feel in the floorboards. "Come," I whispered. We bolted. Not to my room, my door didn't have a lock. We ran to my parents' master bedroom at the end of the hall. As I sprinted across the living room carpet, I heard it. A loud thud against the kitchen door behind me. Then the sound of wood splintering. He wasn't trying to be quiet anymore. He was kicking the basement door in. I slammed my parents' bedroom door shut and twisted the lock. I shoved a heavy oak dresser in front of it, my adrenaline giving me the strength of a grown man. Then I scrambled into the walk-in closet, dragging Buster with me, and shut that door too. I sat in the darkness, surrounded by the smell of my mom's perfume and my dad's dry cleaning, and dialed 911. 911. "What is your emergency?" "Someone is in my house," I whispered. Tears were hot and stinging in my eyes now. "I'm 12. I'm alone. He's in the kitchen." "Okay, honey, I need you to stay on the line," the dispatcher said. Her voice was the calm thinker archetype, steady and controlled. "What is your address?" I gave it to her. Every second felt like an hour. "Are you in a safe place? I'm in the closet in the master bedroom." I heard him break the basement door. The sound of glass shattering echoed from the kitchen. He must have knocked over the vase on the console table. Or maybe he was throwing things. "He's inside," I sobbed into the receiver. "He's coming down the hall." "Compy you." This is the part that haunts me the most. It wasn't the noise. It was the pause. After the crash, the house went silent again. He wasn't running. He was walking. Slowly. Deliberately. The floorboard. The one outside the linen closet. He was 10 feet away from the bedroom door. Buster let out a bark that was so loud in the confined space of the closet that my ears rang. I clamped my hand over his muzzle, praying he wouldn't give away our exact position, but it was too late. The intruder knew exactly where we were. The handle of the bedroom door rattled. "Open up," a voice said. It wasn't a growl. It wasn't a movie monster voice. It was a man's voice, raspy and dry-sounding, almost bored. That was infinitely worse. It sounded like a man who had done this before. I called the police. I screamed, my voice breaking. "They're coming. My dad has a gun." That was a lie. We didn't own guns. But I hoped it would scare him. The rattling stopped. "Officers are 2 minutes away," the dispatcher whispered in my ear. "Stay quiet now." Then a heavy impact hit the bedroom door. The dresser I had shoved in front of it scraped an inch across the hardwood floor. He was throwing his body weight against it. Thud. Another inch. I squeezed my eyes shut, hugging Buster, burying my face in his fur. The dog was struggling to get free, ready to fight, but I held on for dear life. I didn't want him to die for me. The wood of the door frame cracked. A sliver of light from the hallway appeared as the door began to give way. I could see a shadow moving in the gap. Then, sirens. Beautiful wailing, chaotic sirens. Not just one, but multiple. They cut through the night air, getting louder and louder until they were right in the driveway. The banging on the door stopped instantly. I heard footsteps fast, heavy boot falls retreating down the hallway. Then, the sound of the back sliding door being ripped open. "Police K9 unit, make yourself known," a voice boomed from the front of the house. I stayed in that closet for another 10 minutes until the dispatcher told me it was safe to come out, that the officers had cleared the house. When I finally walked out into the living room, shivering in my socks, the house was full of uniforms. The front door was wide open. The kitchen was a wreck. The basement door was hanging off its top, hinged, the wood around the lock completely shattered. "Did you catch him?" I asked an officer who was taking photos of the damage. He looked at me with a grim expression. He got out the backslider into the woods. "Dogs lost the scent at the creek, but we'll find him." They didn't find him that night, but that wasn't the end of it. 2 days later, my dad called a contractor to fix the basement door and check the structural integrity of the frame. The contractor, a burly guy named Mike, called my dad down to the basement about an hour into the job. I followed them down. The basement was unfinished, mostly storage and the furnace. But in the far corner, behind a stack of old holiday decorations, there was a small access panel to the crawl space that ran under the living room. The panel had been removed. Mike shone his flashlight into the dark, dirt-floored void. "You guys got a squatter problem," he said. There in the crawl space was a sleeping bag. It was filthy gray with dust. Around it were dozens of empty food wrappers, candy bars, beef jerky, soda cans. But the most terrifying thing wasn't the trash. It was the peepholes. The intruder had drilled small, crude holes up through the subfloor into the living room. They were tiny, barely noticeable if you weren't looking for them, hidden in the dark grooves of the floorboards or under the edge of the rug. He hadn't just broken in that night. Based on the amount of trash and the dates on the milk cartons found in the pile, the police estimated he had been living under our house for at least 3 weeks. He had been there while we watched TV. He had been there while we ate dinner. He had been listening to our conversations, learning our schedules, waiting for the night my sister was gone and my parents were at a gala. The handprint on the glass hadn't been him trying to get in. It was him checking to see if the coast was clear to come up. We moved 6 months later. My parents couldn't sleep in that house anymore, and neither could I. To this day, whenever I'm home alone, I don't just lock the doors. I check the vents. I check the closets. And I never, ever walk around without shoes on, because the thought of feeling a vibration under the floor of someone moving beneath my feet is a horror I will never outgrow. If you enjoy true horror stories that send chills down your spine, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share this video. Every subscription helps keep these stories coming. I grew up in a suburb that was considered safe. You know, the type manicured lawns, neighborhood watch signs that were mostly for decoration, and neighbors who knew exactly when your trash cans went out. I was 16, a junior in high school, and deeply cynical about everything, as most teenagers are. My mom was a nurse who worked the night shift, and my dad was away on business trips 3 weeks out of the month. Being home alone was my default state. I wasn't scared of the dark or noises. I was the skeptic. If I heard a noise, I assumed it was the ice maker, not a demon. This happened during a heat wave in July. It was oppressively hot, the kind of heat that sticks to your skin the moment you step outside. Our AC had busted that morning, and the repair guy couldn't come until the next day. To get some airflow, I had opened almost every window on the ground floor. The screens were locked in, but the glass was up. I was in the living room, sprawled on the couch in my boxers, and a t-shirt, watching a documentary about deep-sea creatures. It was around 11:00 p.m. The doorbell rang. It wasn't a normal ring. It was a long, insistent press. Dit, dit, dong, dong. I groaned, rolling off the couch. I wasn't expecting anyone. I walked to the front door and looked through the peephole. Standing on my porch was a woman. She looked normal enough, maybe in her late 20s, wearing a floral sundress that looked a bit disheveled. Her hair was messy, plastered to her forehead with sweat. She was shifting her weight from foot to foot, looking back over her shoulder at the street. I didn't open the door. I spoke through the wood. "Can I help you?" "My car broke down," she said. Her voice was muffled, but sounded high-pitched, panicked. "My phone is dead." I just need to use a phone to call a tow truck. Please. It's so hot out here. I hesitated. My parents had drilled stranger danger into me since I was 5, but I was 16 now. A guy. She was a petite woman in a dress. The skeptic in me analyzed the threat level low. I can make the call for you, I said, playing it safe. What's the number? I don't know it, she cried out. She sounded like she was on the verge of tears. I need to call my husband. He has the number for the insurance roadside assistance. Please, I just want to go home. I'm pregnant. She smoothed her dress over her stomach. I hadn't noticed it before, but there was a slight bump that hit my guilt button hard. Leaving a pregnant woman out in 90-degree heat at midnight felt like a villain move. Okay, I said. Hang on. I unlocked the deadbolt and opened the door, but I kept the screen door latched. I'll bring you the cordless phone. You can use it on the porch. She looked at me through the mesh screen. Her eyes were wide blue and intensely focused. She didn't smile. Thank you, she said. You're a lifesaver. I turned my back to her to grab the landline from the hallway table, which was about 10 feet away. Actually, she called out, could I maybe get a glass of water? I feel really dizzy. I paused. I looked back. She was leaning against the doorframe, hand on her forehead. Yeah, sure, I said. One sec. I walked into the kitchen. I grabbed a glass, filled it with tap water and ice. I felt good about myself. I was being a man helping a damsel in distress. I grabbed the phone. When I walked back to the front door, the screen door was open. The woman was standing in my foyer. I stopped dead. Whoa, I didn't say you could come in. She took the glass of water from my hand, ignoring my comment. Her demeanor had changed instantly. The panic was gone. The dizzy act was gone. She took a slow sip, her eyes scanning the living room, the stairs, the hallway leading to the kitchen. Nice place, she said flatly. Parents' home. A cold prickle of alarm went down my neck. Yeah, I lied, instantly. My dad is in the shower. He'll be down in a second. She smiled then. It wasn't a nice smile. It was a baring of teeth. She looked down at her stomach, pressed her hand against it, and then pushed. The fabric indented completely. It was foam. A fake bump. No, she whispered. He isn't. My heart hammered against my ribs. I realized I had made a catastrophic mistake. I looked at the front door. It was wide open. You need to leave, I said, trying to deepen my voice. Now, or what she challenged, stepping closer. She was much taller than she had looked through the peephole. You'll scream, get out, I yelled. She laughed. It was a dry, crackling sound. I don't think I will, and neither will my friends. She looked past me toward the open window in the living room behind the couch. I spun around. 2 men were climbing through the window. They wore black hoodies despite the heat and medical masks. One of them was holding a crowbar. They didn't rush. They moved with a terrifying calmness, like they owned the place. I was trapped. The woman was in front of me, blocking the door. The men were behind me, blocking the living room. Grab him, the woman said. Her voice was ice cold. Grab him. The command hung in the humid air for a split second, a moment that felt suspended in time. The 2 men in the living room lunged forward. They moved, with a terrifying synchronization, like wolves cutting off a deer. I didn't think. I reacted. It was pure lizard brain instinct. I still had the glass of ice water in my hand. With a shout that was half scream, half roar, I hurled the contents of the glass directly into the woman's face. The ice cubes pelted her skin, and the water splashed into her wide predator eyes. She shrieked, stumbling back against the doorframe, her hands flying up to her face. It wasn't an attack that would hurt her, but it bought me the single second I needed. The gap to the stairs was open. I sprinted. I hit the first step just as the faster of the 2 men, the one with the crowbar, swiped at my shirt. I felt the wind of the swing against my lower back. I scrambled up the carpeted stairs on all fours, my feet slipping, my breath tearing at my throat. Get him! Don't let him get to a phone! One of the men roared from the bottom of the stairs. I reached the landing and spun around the corner. My bedroom was the second door on the right. I threw myself inside, slammed the door, and twisted the lock. I grabbed my desk chair and jammed it under the doorknob. wedging it tight against the floorboards, a trick I had learned from movies praying it actually worked in real life. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely function. I still had the cordless phone. I had gripped it so tight my knuckles were white. I dialed 911 again. A heavy body slammed against the bedroom door. The wood groaned and the chair shuddered, but it held. "Open the door, kid," the woman's voice came through the wood. She wasn't shouting anymore. She was back to that calm, chilling tone. "We don't want to hurt you. We just want the cash and the jewelry. Don't make this a murder charge." "I'm on the phone with the police," I screamed, backing away until my back hit the far wall. "They're already on the way," Liar the man growled. The crowbar bit into the wood of the door right near the lock. Splinters flew into the room. They weren't playing games. They were going to come in, and I knew with absolute certainty that if they did, they weren't going to leave a witness. They had seen my face. I had seen theirs. I looked at the window. I was on the second floor. Below my window was a trellis covered in thick ivy leading down to the side garden. It was flimsy, meant for plants, not people, but it was my only option. The door frame splintered. The lock was giving way. The chair legs screeched against the floor as the door was forced open an inch. Through the gap, I saw the black mask and the cold, dead eyes of the man holding the crowbar. I dropped the phone on the bed, leaving the line open, and scrambled out the window. The humid night air hit me like a physical blow. I grabbed the trellis. It creaked ominously. I didn't climb down so much as slide the wood, snapping and tearing at my hands, leaves whipping my face. I fell the last 6 feet, landing hard on my side in the mulch. Pain shot up my ankle, hot and sharp, but the adrenaline washed it away instantly. I scrambled up and limped as fast as I could toward the neighbor's fence. I didn't stop until I was in the bushes of the house next door, Mrs. Higgins' place. She was 80 years old and deaf as a post, but she had a motion sensor floodlight. I collapsed into the hydrangeas, gasping for air, looking back at my house. The lights in my bedroom were on. I saw silhouettes moving frantically past the window. They were tossing the room. Then I saw the beam of a flashlight sweep across the backyard. "He's outside," the woman yelled from the back deck. "Find him." I pressed myself into the dirt, covering my mouth with my hands to stifle my breathing. I watched as the beam of light cut through the darkness, sweeping over the grass, the trees, and inching toward the fence where I was hiding. "Please don't see me. Please don't see me." The light hit the bushes. I squeezed my eyes shut. Then the siren wails cut through the night. The flashlight beam snapped off instantly. I heard car doors slamming and tires screeching as a dark sedan peeled out of my driveway, tearing down the street with its headlights off. When the police found me, I was still shaking so hard I couldn't speak. They cleared the house, but the intruders were long gone. My parents came home early the next morning. My mom cried for hours. My dad, usually the stoic businessman, looked pale and sick as he walked through the house, looking at the splintered door and the mud on the carpets. But the scariest part wasn't the break-in. It was what the police found when they investigated the perimeter of the house the next day. On the back of our mailbox, drawn in faint black marker, was a small symbol. It looked like a triangle with a line through it. The officer told us it was a burglar code. It meant single occupant, vulnerable. In the bushes right next to the front porch where I had stood talking to the pregnant woman, they found a cigarette butt and a wrapper for a fast food burger. They hadn't just driven by and decided to rob the house. Someone had been sitting in those bushes watching the house for hours, maybe days. They had watched my dad leave for his trip. They had watched my mom leave for her shift. They had watched me watching TV, alone. The woman knew exactly what to say to get me to open the door because she had been listening to us. We installed a high-end security system a week later, but it didn't matter. I never looked at a stranger the same way again. Every time the doorbell rings, I don't see a guest. I see a test. And I never ever open the door. If you enjoy true horror stories that send chills down your spine, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share this video. My cousins call me the boy who cried wolf, mostly because I was a prankster growing up. I was the kid who put rubber snakes in the toilet and hid in the pantry to jump out at my mom. I loved the thrill of the scare. I loved the adrenaline. But after what happened in the winter of 2008, I stopped playing pranks. I stopped trying to scare people. Because I learned that there are things in the dark that play back. I was 14. My family had just moved into a massive, drafty Victorian house in upstate New York. It was a fixer-upper, which is code for money pit and creepy as hell. The house had 3 stories, a damp basement, and a laundry chute that ran from the top floor bathroom all the way down to the laundry room in the basement. It was a Friday night. My parents were at the hardware store picking up paint and supplies for the renovations. They left me in charge of my little brother Sammy, who was 7. Sammy was a quiet kid, easily spooked, so my job was basically to keep him occupied and not let him watch anything too scary on TV. "Let's play hide and seek," Sammy suggested. He was sitting on the floor of the living room surrounded by Legos. The house was perfect for it. It was full of nooks, crannies, and half-renovated rooms filled with drop cloths that looked like ghosts in the dim light. "Okay," I said, bored but willing to humor him. "But no hiding in the basement. The lights are out down there." "Okay," he nodded. "You count." I leaned against the kitchen wall, closed my eyes, and began to count. 1, 2, 3. I heard Sammy's little footsteps pattering away. They thumped up the main staircase, then the sound faded as he reached the second floor. 99. 100. Ready or not, here I come. I opened my eyes. The house was silent. The only sound was the wind whistling through the old window frames, a high, mournful sound that the house made constantly. I started my search on the ground floor. I checked the coat closet, the pantry, and behind the couch. Nothing. I moved to the stairs. "Sammy, I'm gonna getcha," I called out in a playful monster voice. I reached the second floor landing. The hallway stretched out in both directions, dark and shadowy. To my left were my parents' room and the guest room. To my right was my room and the main bathroom. I checked the bedrooms first. Under the beds, in the closets, nothing. I walked toward the bathroom. The door was cracked open. "I see you," I whispered, pushing the door open. Empty. But then I heard a sound. A giggle. It echoed weirdly metallic and distant. It was coming from the laundry chute, a small square door set into the wall next to the sink. He wasn't in the chute. He was too big to fit comfortably, but he was probably in the basement yelling up the chute to throw his voice. "You broke the rules, Sammy," I shouted into the chute, opening the little metal door. "I told you no basement." I leaned my head in, listening. The chute was a dark, galvanized steel tunnel that smelled of mildew and old soap. "I'm not in the basement," a voice whispered. It came from the chute, but it didn't sound like it was coming from the bottom. It sounded close, like he was stuck somewhere in the middle. "Sammy," I asked, frowning. "Are you stuck? Come find me." The voice giggled again. "Sammy, this isn't funny. If you're stuck in the chute, Mom is going to kill us." "I'm not stuck," the voice said. "I'm hiding." Something about the tone set my teeth on edge. Sammy had a high, lisping voice. This voice was high, yes, but it lacked the lisp. It sounded clearer, older. "Where are you?" I asked, pulling my head back slightly. "Look down," the voice whispered. I grabbed a flashlight from the bathroom counter. We kept them everywhere because the power was spotty, and shined it down the dark square tunnel of the chute. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating the metal sides. It went down, 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 and hit the pile of dirty laundry at the very bottom in the basement, 2 floors below. There was no one in the chute. It was empty. I stared at the pile of clothes at the bottom. "Sammy, come out of the laundry room. I see you." Silence. Then from behind me, out in the hallway, I heard a creak. I spun around. Sammy was standing at the end of the hall near the stairs. He was holding his stuffed bear, looking terrified. "Who are you talking to?" Sammy asked. My blood turned to ice. I looked at Sammy. Then, I looked back at the open laundry chute door. I thought I was talking to you," I stammered. "I was hiding in the attic stairs," Sammy said. "I heard you yelling at the bathroom wall." If Sammy was in the hall. I slowly turned back to the laundry chute. The metal door was still open. The black square mouth of it seemed to be breathing the cold basement air into the warm bathroom. "Sammy," I whispered, not taking my eyes off the chute. "Go downstairs. Go to the front door. Put your shoes on." "Why? Just do it," I snapped, panic rising in my chest. Sammy turned and ran. I stood there, frozen. I wanted to close the chute door. I wanted to lock it, but I couldn't move my hand toward that darkness. Then the voice came again. It didn't come from the bottom of the chute this time. It came from up. The chute didn't just go down. It vented up to the roof for air circulation. "Found you," the voice whispered. And then a face dropped down from the upper vent. It hung upside down in the shaft, illuminated by the peripheral glow of my flashlight. It was pale, impossibly pale, with long matted hair that defied gravity. Its eyes were wide and black, and it was smiling, a smile that was too wide for a human face. It wasn't a child. It was a man. A man squeezed into a space no man should fit. He lunged downward, his hand shooting out of the chute, open and grabbing my wrist. His grip was like iron, his fingers cold and greasy against my skin. The shock of it was so absolute that for a split second, my brain refused to process it. It was just a sensation, cold, wet, tight. Then the smell hit me. A wave of rot, unwashed body, and something metallic like old copper coins, Tag the man whispered. His voice reverberated in the metal shaft, hitting me from the chute and from the open air at the same time. I screamed, a raw, guttural sound that tore at my throat. I yanked my arm back with every ounce of strength I had. He held on. He was pulling me toward the opening. I could see his other hand, pale and spider-like, reaching out to brace against the rim of the chute to leverage himself out. I swung the heavy maglite flashlight in my free hand. It was a desperate, flailing strike. The metal casing of the flashlight connected with his wrist bone. He hissed a sharp, animalistic sound, and his grip loosened just enough. I ripped my arm free, stumbling back and crashing into the bathroom sink. The vanity mirror shattered behind me. I didn't wait to see him climb out. I didn't wait to see if he was hurt. I bolted. I slammed the bathroom door shut and threw my weight against it for a second, but I knew it wouldn't hold him. The lock was flimsy. I heard a wet thud as he dropped from the chute onto the bathroom tile. "Coming to get you," he sang out. It was a mocking sing-song tone, like a twisted nursery rhyme. I sprinted down the hallway, my socks slipping on the hardwood. "Sammy, run!" I screamed. Get out of the house. Now I reached the staircase and practically threw myself down the steps, skipping 3 at a time. I nearly wiped out at the landing, but caught myself on the banister, the wood burning my palm. Behind me, at the top of the stairs, the bathroom door burst open. I didn't look back. I couldn't. I could hear his footsteps. They weren't heavy bootfalls like the men in the last story. They were bare feet slapping against the wood. Slap, 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 fast, rhythmically inconsistent. He was scrambling on all fours. I hit the bottom floor and rounded the corner to the foyer. Sammy was standing by the front door, paralyzed, his hand on the knob, tears streaming down his face. He hadn't opened it. He was too scared to move. "Open it," I roared. I grabbed Sammy by the back of his shirt and the waistband of his jeans, physically lifting him as I fumbled with the deadbolt. My fingers felt like sausages, clumsy and numb. He was on the stairs. I threw the deadbolt. I wrenched the door open. The cold winter air rushed in, biting and sharp. I shoved Sammy out onto the porch and slammed the door behind us, not bothering to lock it. There was no point. We jumped off the porch, bypassing the steps, entirely landing in the snow-covered lawn. "Go to Mr. Henderson's, I yelled, pointing to the neighbor's house across the street. We ran. The snow was deep, slowing us down, sucking at our ankles. I looked back over my shoulder only once. The front door of our house was standing wide open. Framed in the doorway, illuminated by the street light, was the figure. He was tall and possibly thin, wearing nothing but tattered gray long johns that hung off his skeletal frame. He wasn't chasing us anymore. He was standing on the porch, watching us run. And he was waving. A slow, stiff wave of his hand. We pounded on Mr. Henderson's door until he answered, looking terrified at the sight of 2 hysterical boys shivering in the snow. He pulled us inside and called the police. When the cops arrived, they didn't go in alone. They called for backup. They surrounded the house. They found him in the attic. It turned out the fixer-upper nature of the house was more extensive than we knew. There was a hidden room behind the chimney stack in the attic, a space that had been walled off decades ago, but recently reopened from the inside. The man had been living there. The police identified him as a patient who had walked away from a psychiatric holding facility 3 counties over about a month prior. He was known for burrowing, hiding in tight, confined spaces to feel safe. But here's the part that keeps me up at night. When they searched his little nest in the attic, they found food wrappers, water bottles, and a sleeping bag, just like you'd expect. But they also found a notebook. It was filled with drawings, crude pencil sketches. There were drawings of the house, drawings of the rooms, but mostly there were drawings of me and Sammy. There was a sketch of me sleeping in my bed. There was a sketch of Sammy playing with his Legos. There was a sketch of us eating dinner at the kitchen table. He hadn't just been living there. He had been watching us through the vents and the cracks in the floorboards for weeks. He had been a silent member of our family, observing our routine, learning our names, waiting for the parents to leave so he could finally introduce himself. The game I thought I was playing with my brother, he had probably been playing it with us for days, whispering from the vents, moving things around, enjoying the confusion. We never spent another night in that house. My parents put it up for sale the next week, selling it at a massive loss just to be done with it. To this day, I can't be in a room with an open vent. If I hear a noise in the walls, a scratch, a thump, a settle, I don't assume it's a mouse, I don't assume it's the wind, I leave. Because I know now that the spaces between the walls aren't always empty, and sometimes the things hiding in them are waiting for you to come find them.